Alright, what's up guys? Thanks for tuning back in. This is going to be the video portion to my post on why the Japanese don't get fat. Yeah, this is something a little bit different than I usually do, but I think I got some good stuff in here. So, as you may or may not know, I'm on vacation in Japan right now. I used to live in Japan. I lived here for about 3 years. I kind of speak some Japanese as well. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I've gotten a ton of questions on Japan just in various topics over the years. Japan's one of those places, it's very much, shrouded in mystery, right? For a lot of different reasons. And one of the things that kind of comes up is this issue of why people here seem to stay in such good shape, and especially why people here stay in such good shape, and we're all a bunch of fucking fat asses, basically. So, it's something that I kind of wanted to talk about. It's something I thought a lot about, and just from kind of observing over the 3 years that I lived here, I think I got a pretty good handle on this. So, first thing I kind of want to do is dispel any of the, kind of like any of the mysticism around this. We're always kind of looking for a magic pill. So like, we're looking for like the secret. What's the secret? What's the Japanese secret? Why are they able to stay so thin while we're just getting fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter? And we're looking for kind of like that one singular reason. And there really is none. There's not one singular reason. Sorry to disappoint you. But there are a couple of factors, right? There's no doubt about it. The Japanese stay in much better shape than we do. But the thing is like most things when it comes to diet and staying in shape, it's not one big thing they're doing. It's kind of a lot of little things that they've nailed down, and I want to talk about that. Alright, so the first reason that I put down is I put down that they walk a lot more than we do, and that they kind of just move around a lot more than we do in general. This is something that has been talked about, not just with Japan, but with a lot of other different countries compared to us. I was back home, I'm from Calgary, Canada. I was back home a couple years ago for a friend's wedding, and I was absolutely appalled at just how little walking people in that city actually do. People from Calgary, generally speaking, unless it's the few people that live in the downtown core, they get up, they, walk a couple feet to their nice climate-controlled car, they drive to work, they park, they walk another couple feet to their office, they sit down all day, they get back in their car, and then they go home. And then they plop down on their couch and they just kind of sit there. In Japan, it's a little bit different. Well, no, it's a lot different in Japan. It's a lot different. So in Japan, you go to any of these sort of major cities like Tokyo or Osaka, they have an absolutely amazing, well-developed public transportation system that basically encourages people not to have a car. If you live in any of those cities, you do not need a car at all. Public transportation is absolutely fantastic, and that just encourages people to walk a lot more. So that gets talked about, but what doesn't really get talked about is when I lived here, didn't live in Tokyo or Osaka. I lived in a by Japanese standards it was small. It was like 500,000 people. A smallish city where they did have pretty good public transit, but it wasn't like they had a metro or anything. They had a system of buses that went through. And a lot of people have cars. Yet they still manage to do a lot more moving around than we do. And I kind of thought long and hard about that. And the reason that I came up with, and you absolutely would notice if you sort of travel outside of North America, it's this idea of what's called the third place. So in community planning, you have the first place, which is the home, the second place, which is the office, and then the third place is any kind of public area where people can congregate. This varies from culture to culture, so For example, if you are in, I've never actually been to Europe, but from what I gather, it's the cafe in a lot of countries is a really strong example of a third place where people can gather. In sort of the older American cities, back in like the 50s or whatever, it was kind of like the town hall you could gather in. In Brazil, it's the barber shop where men will kind of gather. It's any kind of public place where you can congregate. In Japan, they have that a lot more. Almost any city you go to, you're going to notice they have like a very, very, very walkable downtown, and there's tons and tons of places where people can gather. And in Japanese culture, it's usually in sort of a restaurant or a bar. Go to any of these cities after like 7 or 8 p.m. and you'll see just tons of salarymen kind of gathered around, sharing a meal with their colleagues. And yeah, the whole kind of city layout is just much, much more conducive to walking around. People here gather, like, for example, I mean, it's winter time right now, so like, people are spending more time at home just because it's fucking cold. But like in the springtime, they have what are called the Hanami parties, which is when the cherry blossoms come out, people will go and they'll gather around in public parks and have these parties. In the summertime, they're going out to the beaches and the parks to have barbecues. People spend a lot more time outside of their home than they do in North America. I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. And that adds up. That extra movement does add up. So that's my first. The second reason that I put down was going to be portion sizes. Sorry, I shut the blinds there. So one of the things you'll notice if you do come to visit Japan or you come to live here is that when you go out to eat or when you buy stuff, the portion sizes are a lot smaller. They are a lot smaller. I remember when I went home for that friend's wedding, I swung by the drive-thru at McDonald's and I got just like a regular combo. And like the regular drink that came with it, the ones in Japan are like half the size. It's like shocking. It's so shocking. Yeah. Everything's just smaller here. And I think what's kind of amazing about that is how much your perception of normal changes when you kind of go from country to country, right? So when I first moved out here, I kind of bitched and complained because every time I would go out to eat, I would still be hungry afterwards because, for me, growing up in North America, that wasn't a lot of food. Well, the longer that I lived here, and this is kind of similar in Korea as well, actually, your perception changes, right? These new portion sizes become normal portion sizes, right? Now I go out and eat here and I'm full, but when I go back to Canada and I go out for a meal, I literally cannot finish it. I absolutely cannot finish most of the meals they serve me, whereas before I had no problem finishing it. Okay, so what happened here? Like, my internal organs didn't change size, so what's going on? Well, it's just my perception of it changed, right? And so that, I think, is really, really important. So that's my second reason, is everything's smaller. All right, so the third reason that I put down is social pressure. This is a big one, and it's one that we don't like to talk about because it offends our Western sensibilities, right? We don't like having our feelings hurt. Fat acceptance does not exist in Japan. It just does not exist, right? The Japanese, there's a ton of pressure in Japan to stay thin. There's pressure from the media, there's pressure from your friends and your social circle, your family. Getting fat just is not cool here. It's just not a cool thing to do. And I've experienced this, if you start gaining some weight, Japanese people will kind of let you know. They're pretty subtle about it, but they will definitely find a way to let you know that hey, you're packing on the pounds. And the thing is, they're not being mean about it. They're just they're very, this is one of the things I love about Japan. They're very realistic, right? They're being real. They don't have this fucking bullshit that we have of what's that slogan? Healthy at any weight. Come on, man, give me a fucking break. they haven't diluted themselves the way that we have. That's a big one. Social pressure kind of keeps them in check. Now, I will say that this is both a good thing and a bad thing, right? I love that they're so realistic here, that they haven't bought into this fucking bullshit that we have. But by the same token, it can kind of go a bit far sometimes. And I think that women kind of bear the brunt of it. I've heard some stories before of some girls, these Japanese chicks who are in really, really great shape and super duper hot, who have said like that their ex-boyfriends will find like the one little bit of flab on their arm and be like, ooh, you're getting fat, which is completely fucked up. So definitely goes too far sometimes, but you know, yeah, social pressure, big factor. Okay, reason number 4, and I put this down as the health incentives. So when I first got here, I kind of just thought that Japanese people were really neurotic about their weight. Like, they'd gain a couple pounds and they just freak out. One of the things that was told to me was that Japanese people, or Asians in general, are kind of more susceptible to all of these metabolic illnesses that are plaguing the West, right? Diabetes, it's like metabolic syndrome X, this whole cluster of sort of metabolic conditions. They're more susceptible to it at a lower body fat. And I actually looked into it, and it turns out that that's true. So how it works is that basically, like, if you take any European person, they can be much more overweight for a much longer period of time before they generally start showing symptoms of these illnesses. The problem with East Asians in general is that these things start to show up at a much lower body fat after much less time, right? So if you have sort of an Asian person who's like even 15 to 20 pounds overweight, they could very well be in the danger zone. Whereas as Europeans, we kind of have a little bit more leeway. I don't know exactly what the science is. I put a link to an article, or I put a link to a post in the original post that I did. So if you're interested in the science, check it out. It has something to do with the rate of abdominal muscle to abdominal fat. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, they have that very real health incentive. And that's kind of one of the things where, you know, we don't have that. Like, I remember when I was really overweight for a really long time, you know, I would go to the doctor and he would just he'd be like, well, yes, you are overweight, but you don't have any of the symptoms of any illnesses. So for me, I didn't really have that sort of fire under my ass. Whereas if I knew that, like, just gaining 15 to 20 pounds was enough to put me in the danger zone, I would definitely have been more, you know, judicious in my younger years about keeping the weight under control. Okay, and the last point that I had on my list was packaging. This is actually something I've never heard anyone talk about, so I'm pretty proud of sort of stumbling upon this. But, so, okay, check this out. This guy right here, is it focusing? Yes, okay. This is a little single serving packet of ice cream. So, in Japan, if you want to go buy ice cream or frankly a lot of other kind of sweet desserty foods, you go and you buy something like this. These little individual single serving things. It's really hard here to find like a massive, like, family size pail of ice cream, right? It's just one of those cultural quirks. Everything's kind of served up in these little individual-sized, single-serving things. Terrible for the environment, but really good for your diet. And here's why. It's all kind of psychological. So, let's take the ice cream example. If you go out and you buy a pail of ice cream, you know, you go and you scoop yourself out a serving. It's kind of hard to determine how much you should actually be having, and there's all kinds of little psychological factors that will determine how much you kind of scoop out for yourself, right? There was a study a while back, basically it had to do with like the size of the plate or the size of the bowl. So if you have a bigger plate or a bigger bowl, you will sort of portion the food to fill that entire thing up. It's just one of those things. One of those weird little psychology things. And the other factor is if you go out and you buy a massive thing of ice cream or a huge box of cookies or cereal or whatever it is, and you have some of it, well, now you have a lot of that shit in your house, okay? And like, it can be hard. Psychologically speaking, it can be hard. Like, that's one of the biggest tips I would give anyone who's trying to lose some weight is just like, take the shitty food, get it out of your house. I believe in flexible dieting, but if you are going to go and have ice cream or cookies or any kind of treat, just go out, have it, but don't bring a lot of it into your house, right? That's just, you're depleting your willpower. Like, nothing good can come from it. So the fact that like the whole country kind of does this, right? So all these foods are just individually wrapped, right? It makes it so easy, right? You don't have to fuck around. You don't have to determine the serving size. You just go to the convenience store or the grocery store, get your little ice cream thing, have it, and then you're done with it, right? There's no messing around. It's already portioned out for you, and there's not a bunch of it in your house afterwards. So that's the last thing, packaging. All right, so that's it. That is my list. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. If you're ever curious about why Japanese people don't seem to get fat, those are some things to think about. So that's it. I'm going to be back to posting regular content pretty soon. And yeah, trip's going well. Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Peace.